So the other day I was walking with my wife past an antique store and we decided to go inside. I wasn't really expecting to find anything, but I found this book. It's called Chess in 30 Minutes by E.S. Lowe. I had never heard of that person. It's copyrighted in 1955. It was $4. I was like, I'll buy it and I'll read it when I get home. So I bought it, didn't really expect too much. And I was blown away by the very last chapter in this book. So the beginning, it's kind of what you would expect. These are what the pieces are. These are how they move. This is how you notate. It was old school notation, which if you've never seen that, I'll show you a screenshot or something. But the very last chapter is called The Techniques for Winning Quickly. And it features 7 games. It says 6 games on the thing, but it was actually 7 games where it shows you like opening traps. You've got smothered checkmates. You've got queen sacrifices and queen traps. And some of these games I had never seen before. I mean, it was a very pleasant surprise. So I wanted to share this with you guys. You're going to really enjoy these games. They're short, they're quick, but they're going to teach you a lot about things you should not do in the opening, just kind of general principles you should follow. Super fantastic. And even if you're a higher rated player, you're going to appreciate the way that these games finish. So let's go ahead and just jump right in to these 7 games. All right, so the first game we're going to look at is from the Ruy Lopez. So white attacks the pawn, black defends the pawn. You've probably seen this many, many times. And white plays bishop to b5, attacking the knight. And in this game, black plays the Berlin defense, which has become very, very common, and it's a good option for black. Knight to f6, simply attacking the pawn. And in this case, white decides to just go with the quiet d3 to defend the pawn. And now here's where it starts to get interesting because black decides to set a trap and plays the move knight to e7. Now, I'd like you guys to pause and try to figure out what is the trap that black is setting by playing the move knight to e7. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, you probably noticed that by moving knight to e7, they actually left this pawn undefended, and we can simply capture that for free if we want. Well, that's the trap. And in this game, white actually did do that. And what do you think black played next? You had a chance to look at that. The move is c6, and it's attacking the bishop. But the point is that if the bishop just retreats somewhere, let's say here, queen to a5 check is a fork on the king and the knight. And yeah, you can save the check, and then you lose your knight. Okay, so that's the idea. Very, very clever idea. Now, it gets even more interesting here because white, upon seeing the trap at this moment in the game, decides, you know what, I'm going to set my own trap and plays the move knight to c4. And if black takes this bishop, you see what's going to happen. Knight to d6 is checkmate, smothered checkmate on move 7. That's amazing, right? So what does black need to do instead? Well, they need to play the move knight to g6, allow the bishop to control that square so there's no longer a checkmate. And you say, well, didn't white just avoid the trap? Not quite, because the bishop is still under attack. You can go back, but then you get forked and you're still losing a piece. So at the end of the day, the trap was successful for black, but it just had a little, bump in the road there if you would get smothered checkmated, okay? Really, really fascinating game. If you're wondering, white should not take the pawn. All you need to do is just play some other move. Develop a piece, play d4, castle, whatever you want. Just don't take the pawn because of that idea. Okay, let's jump on to the second game here. Game number 2 features the move d6. Okay, this is called the Philidor defense, where black just defends the pawn directly with the pawn. It's kind of a passive approach because you're not developing any pieces, but it is playable. So white plays bishop c4, and black plays bishop g4. Now, this is not really the greatest move. Generally speaking, you want to develop the knights before the bishops. But, all right, it's still not the end of the world until this move, h6. Now, at this point, black has just wasted too much time. You've left too many pieces on the back. You've played a move here that does absolutely nothing, and you've developed the bishop before the knight. So white actually has a very powerful move here. If you would like to pause, what's the move here for white? You had a chance to look at that. The move is knight takes e5, which is a queen sacrifice. And the reason is that black tries to take your queen, you take here with check, forces the king to come up, and you have knight to d5, which is checkmate. If you look carefully, all of these squares are controlled. The bishop is defended by the knight, and there's nothing for black to do. Okay, this is called Legal's Mate. Super nice trap, and it has to do with the fact that black wasted too much time with these pawn moves and then, got greedy with the queen. You just can't do that, right? So very, very nice one there. Okay, let's move on to game number 3. We're going to go all the way back here. Knight to c6, And now we have knight to c3, which is called the 3 knights defense, okay? Black could play the 4 knights defense if they want, but they don't do that in this game. They play bishop to c5. Now, bishop to c5 is a slight inaccuracy because of the following trick that it allows white to do. You would like to pause. What move should white play here? You got a chance to look at that. The move is knight takes e5. And the idea is that after black recaptures, you're going to get a fork, and you're going to get your piece right back, and you've eliminated one of those center pawns, so you get a little bit more central control by doing this, okay? So what black should have done here is say, all right, I'm getting forked. I'll just go back, and, white's going to take me. I take back, but the position's pretty equal, right? Both players have one piece out. There's not really a whole lot happening. But instead, black tries to get a little too fancy and plays the move queen to e7, thinking, you know what? I'll just get my queen activated, regardless of how, white's going to take, and maybe I'll be able to do something. So white decides to make black pay for this of breaking the opening principle of bringing out your queen too early. So what do you think white played? You had a chance to look at that. The move is knight to d5. Instead of taking this straight away, takes advantage of the fact that he can gain a free tempo, plant his knight in the center, and just attack the queen. Pretty nice idea. So black plays queen to d6, trying to keep the queen active. And now white captures the bishop and then has a very nice follow-up here. What do you think white played in this position? You had a chance to look at that. The move played was bishop to f4. Now, bishop to e3 was also a good move if you would have thought that, because you're gaining a tempo on the queen. But this one's kind of tricky because you're attacking the knight, but you're also lining up on c7, which is going to set up a fork. For example, if black tries to move away, you're walking into this. Okay? So what does black do instead? They play d6, which seems like a pretty logical move. You defend the knight, you block off this. Makes a lot of sense, right? But there's a problem in black's position. If you want to look very carefully, what move should white play next? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is, wait for it. This one made me smile. The move is b4. And what white is doing is saying, look, I don't think your queen has a lot of places to go. I'm just going to trap it. I'm just going to trap the queen. That's what's happening here. Let's look carefully. Can you take this? No. Can you go here? No. Can you go here? No. Can you stay there? No. Can you go over here? No. Can you take this pawn? No. Because the knight. Can you go here? The bishop? No. The knight, the queen, the bishop, the king. You can't take that. There's only one place for the queen to go. c6. I have to go c6. And now white has another good move. What did white play next? You had a chance to look at that. The move is bishop to b5, and it's a pin. We're pinning the queen. And some of you are saying, but Nelson, nothing's defending the bishop. You're absolutely right. But if black takes it, there's a fork. It's actually a triple fork. We don't care about the rook. We're going to take the queen, but still, triple forks are nice. Wow. So essentially, just to recap what happened here, on move 10, black's queen is trapped. At this point, the queen is a goner. You can't save the queen. Like, how cool is that, right? And this all happened because of white's decision way back here of playing queen e7. Instead of just saying, look, I got the, I'm going to lose the piece. It's fine, whatever. No, he tries to bring the queen out and then gets chased around, and trapped. Really, really fascinating, right? Super nice game. Okay. All right, let's keep going. See what we have next. Game number 5 comes out of, actually, no, I'm sorry. Game number 4, I was about to skip one, comes out of the Gyuko piano, okay, which is bishop to c4 and bishop to c5. So what you'll notice is it's very similar to the last game where the knight was on c3, except now we have the bishop on c4. And by the way, if you're wondering about the same trick of knight takes here and getting a fork, it doesn't work because now your bishop is under attack. You would lose the bishop, and you actually lose 2 pieces in that situation, okay? So just keep that in mind because some people get confused. They think that they can do it here. It's not the same, right? It's not the same as when the knights are out if the bishop's on c4. So just keep that in mind. So what happens in this game? White just plays the move d3. Nice and calm move. Black plays knight to e7. And you might not think that there's anything wrong with this move. But normally, the knight should go to f6, right? c6 and f6 are really the better squares for the knights. And you're going to see why this is such a big deal in just a few moves. So white plays knight to g5, which is attacking on f7. That's a pretty annoying threat here, okay? And black really, at this point, needs to play d5 to try to shut down the bishop. If they don't do that, they're going to get into trouble. And sure enough, they decide to castle. Now, what should white play to follow up here? You had a chance to look at that. The move is queen to h5. And now you can see if the knight was sitting on f6, this move would not be possible, right? But because the knight is on e7, it is possible, and all of a sudden, black has to deal with a checkmate threat. Okay, so they say, well, I'll play h6 to stop that, but what does white do now? You had a chance to look at that. That's correct. Knight takes f7, because also white was attacking on f7 with 3 pieces now. You can get away with taking this. So black doesn't really like the looks of taking this because you lose the rook. They see that their queen is under attack, so they try to save the queen. But now white has a way to finish off the game in 3 moves with checkmate. What should white play? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight takes h6. It's a double check, which is important, right? Because otherwise maybe you would lose your knight or something, but you're not, because the bishop's hitting the king as well. So the king has to move. That's the only way to get out of a double check. You have to move your king off of that square, right? Because you can't capture 2 pieces or block 2 pieces at the same time. So he moves. Knight goes back to f7 check to unleash the queen now, because that pawn has been eliminated. And then when the king goes back, the queen goes in for checkmate on move 10. I mean, this is incredible, right? It's move 10, and you've got your bishop lined up, defending the knight with the queen in the corner, checkmating the king. It's amazing, right? How quickly something can go wrong from a simple decision like this to put your knight on e7 instead of f6, where it really should have been placed. It's fascinating, right? So just keep that in mind. Really try to put your pieces on the best possible squares every single time you get an opportunity to do that, because you never know how it can snowball against you. Okay? Hope you guys are enjoying this, but we still have 3 more games to go, and they get more interesting, in my opinion. All right, let's keep going. So, next game. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and now we have a Ponziani. Now, this game actually is the fun one for black. So what I'm going to do is flip the board here so you can see this from black's perspective. Okay, so Ponziani, and one of the better ways to play against the Ponziani is the move d5. I've talked about this before. The reason this is good is because you don't have to worry about if they take you and you recapture, you don't have to worry about your queen getting harassed. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, in this game, white doesn't do that. They play queen to a4, which is one of the main lines. You pin the knight, and you're trying to take here. So black says, okay, I'll go ahead and let you do that, but I'm going to get this pawn on e4, and then I'm going to jump my queen to d5 to defend my knight, which was being attacked. White says, okay, let's keep building up the pressure. 1, 2, 3 pieces now are lined up on the knight, and only 2 are defending it. So black says, let's go knight to e7, adding a defender. And you know what's interesting? I just showed you a game where I said, the knight has to go to f6, right? You don't want to play the knight to e7. And here we see a game where I'm telling you, no, knight's going to e7. And notice how it has to do with like what's going on in the position. In the other position, black wanted to castle that way, and the knight on f6 would have been great to stop the queen. But in this game, black's not even going to be able to castle that way. You have other things that you're dealing with, and so you have to adapt, right? This is an important principle in chess. You have to be able to adapt and understand when you kind of bend the rules, right? And that's what we see here. So he's defending with the knight. White plays f4. This is a pretty common idea in the Ponziani. Now that this has been defended, the knight was being threatened here, and so white needs to deal with that. So we have bishop to d7, adding another defender, getting ready to potentially castle this way. And white captures, and he takes with the king, and then something really interesting is going to happen very, very soon. So just watch carefully. Castles, knight to f5, and believe it or not, this is an aggressive attacking move. Okay, an aggressive attacking move. And as an example, let me think if I can think of a good move here. Let's say white just does something like this. Bishop to c5 check is very, very powerful, because if you go over here, there's actually a really nice checkmate. If you would like to pause, what can black play? You had a chance to look at that. The move is knight to g3 check, and the queen comes over, and it's checkmate. Look at that. I mean, out of nowhere. Right out of nowhere. So that is what's going on in this position when black plays the move knight to f5. Okay, and I want you to remember that as we go through the rest of the game. So knight to f5, very aggressive move. The white plays b4, which, I mean, considering what we just saw, pretty good move, right? You stop the check. There's no more checks on this diagonal. So nicely done there by white. So black plays a5, and he's trying to just like undermine this and activate the rook, and let's see what's going to happen. White plays king to h1, getting out of the danger, or so they think, and watch what black plays next. A takes b4. Now, what do you notice about that move? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, you should notice that, wait a second, aren't we losing a rook here? What are we doing? Well, that's what white does. He takes the rook. Now, what do you do if you're playing as black? Why did you do that? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is bishop c5, attacking the queen. And some of you might be thinking, wait a second, Nelson, this rook's not defended either. What is black doing? Takes another rook. Just lost 2 rooks. Why did he do that? Well, if you remember what I showed you earlier, it's the same idea. He just had to sacrifice 2 rooks to make it happen. But now there's knight to g3 check and queen to h5 checkmate. That is incredible, right? And so this is a good example of how, a couple of things, different ways you can attack the king, but once you have an idea, don't just give up on it so easily, right? Like, how many people, if you're playing this game, you're like, ooh, I have a really nice threat here with bishop c5. Ah, too bad. Doesn't work. That's so sad. You move on with the game. No, this player said, no, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work, even if I have to sacrifice 2 rooks to do it, right? It's incredible. It's incredible. Super nice game. Hope you guys can just appreciate how clever that was. Okay, let's take a look. We have 2 more games to go. And this time, actually, I'm going to go back to white's perspective here. This time, we get to look at the king's gambit. All right, so f4. In the first game, black takes. So this is the king's gambit accepted. Knight to f3, very common move because you stop the queen from coming here and putting you in check. g5 is another common move for black. It's a very aggressive move because you're not developing pieces, but you're trying to hold on to this pawn at all costs, essentially. And sometimes you can even use this to attack, right? White plays bishop to c4, developing a piece. And here, black goes wrong. Black says, you know what? I don't like the look of this. I don't like the look of this. Let me just solve all my problems with f6 because I no longer have a pawn under attack. I'm also just defending everything very nicely. And logically, maybe that makes a little bit of sense. The issue has to do with the diagonals that you weakened. Okay, so how does white take advantage of that? White to play, what do you think the move is? You had a chance to look at that. Knight takes g5 is correct. And yes, you're grabbing a pawn. And yes, you're threatening to come in here with a fork. But more importantly, you're unleashing your queen, right? And so even though you lose the knight, it doesn't really matter because once that queen gets involved, it's all over for black. You have only one move. And then if you'd like to pause, how does white finish off the game? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen to f7 check, forces the king to come up. Queen to d5 check, forces the king to go back. And then queen to e5 is actually just checkmate. Bishop is controlling there. Whew. Really nice stuff, right? Really nice stuff. So, shows you the dangers. You play against the king's gambit and you play like one wrong move. f6 here, one wrong move. That's it. Got to be really, really careful. Okay? So, the last game we're going to look at is also the king's gambit, but this time, black plays better moves. And what I want you to notice about this game, you know, in all the other games, the player who lost made a pretty significant mistake, right? This game, they didn't really play like bad moves. They just still got destroyed from a brilliant game. So you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So here, black plays d5, which is, if you're going to play against the king's gambit, this, in my opinion, is the best way to do it. The Falkbeer counter gambit. It's a fantastic approach. Just immediately strike at the center, get both of those bishops out, and just start developing your pieces. Okay? So white plays knight f3, takes, bishop to d6. Both players are doing a great job of fighting for the center, developing their pieces. d4, the en passant, brings out the bishop. Knight to f6, castles. Again, both players are playing great moves. Nobody's really made any big mistakes here. Everything is looking good. Knight to c3, takes. And right here is where you could argue that black kind of makes actually this trade with the idea of winning a pawn was really the mistake. And that's a very subtle thing, right? But black was thinking, you know, look, I'll trade and then I have a fork and I'm going to win a pawn. And I'm already castled. I have a knight out. Like, what could possibly be wrong with this, right? And it kind of makes sense. But watch what happens. He takes the pawn, bishop to f4, and notice 1, 2, 3. The rook is involved. The queen is ready to go. And black is still not developed. Okay? But you say, but black's position is solid. What's white going to do? Watch what happens. He moves the queen. And now there's just a fascinating move here from white that if you'd like to pause, but it's not an easy one to see. If you had a chance to look at that, the move is bishop takes c7. And It's like, okay, white's trying to get their pawn back, but are they doing something else? The answer is yes, they're unleashing the rook. Okay, great, but is that worth giving up a piece? Black thinks not and takes the piece, right? So what is white going to do next? If you had a chance to look at that, I kind of already gave you a hint. They unleashed the rook. Now they sacrifice the rook. So just like that, they sack a bishop and they sack a rook. And why? Because they want to get after the king, and the knight was really the only piece that was defending the king. Now you've got a bishop, you've got a queen, and all of black's pieces are on the other side of the board essentially, except the rook, which isn't really doing much. Okay, but you still have to figure out how to finish off the game. What does white play? You had a chance to look at that. The move is queen to h5. How many times have we seen this move? Threatening checkmate on h7. Black has to stop that and plays the move f5 to block off the bishop. But what does white do now? You had a chance to look at that. Queen to g5 check. Forces the king into the corner. What does white play now? That's correct. Queen to f6 check. The king moves over. And now the follow-up blow, knight to d5, attacks the queen. And when the queen moves, knight to e7 is almost checkmate. The only thing for black to do is to sacrifice the queen. And now white is just in a winning position because of the material. And black's king is still weak. So all of this happened because black decided in this position to say, you know what? I'm going to make this trade and win a free pawn. And it shows you the dangers. It shows you the dangers of grabbing free pawns if it gives your opponent a whole bunch of developing moves, right? And it wasn't even a whole bunch in this case. It was like one. It was like one free move here with bishop f4. And then all of a sudden, bam, sack, and you're losing your queen or getting checkmated. It's incredible, right? So, like I said, guys, this was so much fun, like going through these games. Most of these I've never seen before. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I thought this was fantastic, and I just wanted to share it. So let me know in the comments, hit the like button and all that good stuff if you appreciated the video. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.